Ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen and ladies, ladies and gents. What I'd like to do is I'd like to put us on pause because I'm going to have some music playing in the background, so one second. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen and ladies, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the beat down just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be reading another story. A story that I wrote. It's a short story. It's about 6 pages, handwritten, long. And it's about 3 characters. You have Craig, Brian, and Keith. And not based on a true story, but based on a story nonetheless. So, without any further ado, we're going to bring this up to full screen. Doing a lot of work in the background. I think that's a little too much, don't y'all? No, this song isn't long enough. I'm going to have to pick one that's longer, because that one's not long enough. So by the time I get finished doing all the stuff I'm doing, it won't be long enough. So let's do we got the hip hops. If it ain't one thing, it's another. Let's do this one. Okay. And as soon as it starts, I'll get started. Again, this story is called Craig, Brian, and Keith. I thought I lost it too. Even wrote it again. And I think this is the first one. But I wrote it again later. And added just a little bit more to it. Brian, Craig, and Keith are friends. Very good friends. Best of friends. And like I said, the story is a fictional one, but it's also an adventurous one. If you remember the movie Chronicle, this story is not like Chronicle, but the same premise with the best friends and discovering things. So let's see what these 3 young men discover. Craig, Brian, and Keith were friends. Keith was more distant than Craig or Brian. Craig was the scientist of the group. Quantum physics. He was always attempting to change time and space. The space continuum or something. Too boring for me. Then one day Craig figured out how to do just that. He figured that if he reacted to an event a split second sooner, he would be able to get a glimpse of the future. He made the calculations and prepared. While on his skateboard, while performing a move, he spun in an opposite direction, a second sooner than he had done 100 times before. Or more. That did it. Not only did he see his landing the second before he would break and fracture his ankle, but he was able to make the adjustments and to avoid the injury. As you can see, and you can probably imagine, he was amazed. And unlike everyone else who would have spread this news far and wide of this newfound revelation, he remained silent, keeping it to himself. He had further calculations to make. He's now able to see a week in advance. He says, "This is amazing! This is awesome!" All the time. He saves at least 5 people from dying. Just by altering their movements, he would stop them to ask them a question or bump into them on purpose so as to deviate them from their course to where they would be injured. Now, it's time to tell Brian and Keith. But when they hear it, Keith is the skeptic. And Brian wants to make a profit. But Craig tells Brian how he thinks he can do the same thing without the risk of injury. He tells him as he is dribbling the basketball that he will spin to the right, and just before completing the spin, he'll quickly spin back to the left immediately. Brian is a natural at everything, especially basketball, but after 30 tries, he gives up. Craig says, "I know this should work. I've seen it." So Brian is determined not to give up. He keeps trying for a moment, and he sees himself calibrating and celebrating after he completes the move. Then, the very next time he sees himself drinking water and walking home, He immediately tells Craig, and Craig tells him that he can see as far as 4 days into the future. It was 7, but it keeps decreasing. He can't figure out why. Brian says, yeah, I can only see 5 days ahead, but it worked! Man, you're a genius, Craig! And Craig says, yeah, I need to work on this. I need to work this out. Okay, now Keith wants to be part of this newfound fun. So it is 2 weeks and he still can't get it. He's about to give up, and Craig keeps encouraging him not to give up, to keep trying. Brian now has mastered the art of betting on games, gambling. He's able to see as far as 2 weeks into the future. Craig is only able to go to 6 days, but he can't go beyond 8. Craig has figured out why the days were diminishing. He has realized that it is due to the tragedy that he will experience. He sees his own death. Has seen it now for 5 weeks. He keeps pretending and preventing it from happening. One day, he takes a different route home. The next day, he stays at home. The next, he rides his bike to school. The only drawback is each time the view of his death is more horrific and brutal. One time, he sees himself getting hit in the head, or getting hit head on by a semi. The next time, falling from a bridge. But now, it's an industrial lawnmower. That's the only thing he sees and has seen for several weeks. He always gets stuck underneath this so-called industrial lawnmower and gets ripped to shreds. He's not telling anyone. It's something he thinks he can handle. Keith is finally able to get it. He is the only one who is able to jump, who has to jump off a roof and flip 3 times in order for it to work. And while he's in midair jumping off a roof and spinning in the air, he spins to the right quickly and he's able to accomplish it. To the right, if he spins, he's 2 years into the past. To the left, he sees 2 years in advance. Keith and Brian talk. Keith says, man, you see it, don't you? And Brian says, yeah, man. And I see him keeping it together, trying to, but we have to help him. Keith says, man, I have been helping, ripping out all of the wires of every lawnmower I can find. And Craig says, yeah, Brian says, yeah, me too. But it's not working. Hey, let's tell him what we know and try to help him figure this out. They tell Craig. He's aware they knew. He saw them helping. He still thought that he could handle this and figure this out. He tells them that it is his heart condition. That has to be it. They ask, what condition? He says, my heart is 25% smaller than normal. And every time I jump travel, they say. Craig says, yeah, what do you guys call it? They say, spin travel. Craig says, you're not good at picking names. You never were. Craig says, okay, I like spin travel. Brian says, okay, so why not just stop? Why not say enough? It's too late, Craig says. I've done it too many times, and it's irreversible. Eventually, I'll not be able to jump. He says, okay, spin travel, not jump travel. Well, you don't have to. We got your back, don't we, Keith? Yeah, see? Man, you stop worrying. I will go home and I'll write down every time you come close, and we will try in 3 months in advance. Craig says, hey, yeah, don't overdo it though, Keith. And Keith says, you be quiet. I'll do whatever I have to. Craig says, thanks, man. It's been a year. Keith can only see a week ahead now. Craig is growing weaker. The doctors can't explain it, but it's definitely his heart. Brian has paid millions looking for a cure, but nothing. He can only go forward 2, maybe 4 days. Craig says, hey, soon I'll be bedridden. And what are the chances, man, of getting ripped to shreds by a lawnmower in a bed? And Keith and Brian say, hey, stop this. And he says, all I want, and besides, says Keith, you mean too much to us. Craig looks at the guys in their face, and he says, I'm gonna die. It is a fact. Brian says, shut up! Don't you ever say a joke around like that again. Keith says, hey, Brian. Yo, Craig, man, you know how he gets, so stop it. Craig says, hey, Brian, hey, man, it's gonna be all right. Really. Now 6 months have passed. No more seeing Craig's death. Everything seems to finally pass. Brian can only see 5 hours. Keith, now only 4 days forward or backwards. Craig is feeling much better. So now Brian has more than enough money, and he decides to take Craig and Keith to a hockey game. They sit in the club seats, enjoying the night out, even getting to meet many of the players. Brian is cautious, though. Craig can't even get near any ice machine that cleans the floor of the hockey ring, any trucks, tractor trailers, nothing. He won't allow him to come close to any of these things. Well, after leaving the locker room, they get into the car and they drive home. On the way home, the car loses control and crashes into a field where a group of kids are taking an industrial lawnmower for a joyride spin in the middle of the field, making their little designs in the grass. Well, they didn't see Craig, that he had been thrown from the car. They rush over to help, and literally, Craig is cut to shreds. The police said that he was probably dead before the mower hit him due to the accident. Brian is horrified and close to committing suicide. Keith decides to jump back because he wants to see what happen, but it takes a year before he makes this decision. And so after a year's time, he goes back and he sees Craig, that he was still alive after the accident, after he hit the ground. And just before the mower hits him, he says, man, it's okay, but don't come back and see this again. I've had a good life. And tell Brian, it was the best day of my life. Keith couldn't figure out how they missed this, why they could not see this, and he realized later that neither he nor Brian checked because Craig had asked him not to. He said he wanted one day without it, but it turns out that Craig checked and he knew, left a note saying that he was tired, that he was not going to run anymore. I did tell Brian, and he's doing better now, realizing that as a friend, he did what a friend would have done. He kept his friend alive and safe as long as he could. He said that to keep doing this would cause our deaths eventually, and he vowed to never do it again. He's facing what he says are the facts of the universe. You can't cheat death. None of us can. I have studied Craig notes, and I am finally understanding some of the basics. Each of us were only able to go back as far or as forward as we were healthy. I will not stop. You see, I have gone as far back as 7 years to see Craig and avoided the bad times, watched his research, and can now go as far as 70 years. But that only means that I will die in my 70s. Who knows? Maybe I can get some advantage over this, or use the things that I've seen to advance everything. If I can go 60 years, learn of the technology and bring it back to those doing the research, Perhaps, who knows? So far, Brian does not want to do it ever again. He's operating the Master Craig Foundation, a fitting name. You know, we can't tell anyone. Do you know what they have done each time we've told people? I have been kidnapped 48 times, killed 27 times, offered more than $700 billion. And Brian, because he would never compromise or seek to get rich off of this, out of respect for Craig, he's been killed 246 times. No matter how much he has been offered, not one time did he compromise. Good for him. I have had to prove I knew what I was talking about by studying the work of the inventors, seeing the whole day's event, writing them down, never showing my face, never meeting in the same place, always by express or overnight mail. It, in some cases, took several attempts to get them on the right track. But the progress has been amazing. The new Millennium Revolution is what they're calling it. NMR. And although I'm tired, going forward or going backwards, and then forward again, I'm not losing time. Now 73 years forward, and that's 7 years more than originally. Brian and I have just observed Craig's 4th anniversary. It does not seem to me like 4 years, as I just saw him this morning, but he has been gone 4 years. I have helped to stop the beginning of wars, mass violence, and the spread of disease. They call me the messenger, but I don't care. I just want to improve our conditions, to advance without giving up so much of what makes us us. Now it's been 62 years since Craig died. I'm only able to go back 73 years, but he is still with me. Brian died last year. He was content, and he just passed in his sleep. He wouldn't allow me to tell him of how or when or to try to prevent it. He says he did not want me to go through what he went through. I honored his wish. I can see 15 years into the future. In 15 years, I reveal my identity, and I tell everyone not how we went back, as every scenario always plays the same. I destroy all of Craig's notes and did it long ago. All of his research has been destroyed as well. I can always go back and review them, but never can I allow it to go public because it is always exploited. Israel, Palestine, they are still enemies. The world is still divided. Despite the many changes, man has not advanced. I have a family, a wife, Lana, married 51 years. Yeah, 27 attempts before I found her. The children, 126 of them. In reality, only 4. 3 girls and a son. Yes, some people would say that that's not right. That's not fair. But seeing hundreds of thousands of different realities is not fair. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even want to try it at first. But it is what it is. We have achieved sustainable energy, cars and craftings that are powered by Zen cells, solar, oxygen, but it is not used often, and food preparation is the safest it has been in 3,000 years. The average lifespan is 97 for women and 102 for men. Yeah, there's still violence, but a gunshot wound is virtually unheard of. For now they have wave guns that can disintegrate a person in seconds. That one I couldn't prevent, as the wave compactor was for waste disposal, and every scenario was the same outcome. The wave gun, the wave cannon, the wave laser, all the result of improving energy consumption. But despite the drawbacks, we did not save the planet, Despite the drawbacks, we did save the planet and man hundreds of times. I will die tomorrow. I'll be executed for acts against humanity. It's okay. This was the best scenario. They tortured me, but I could not tell them how it was done. Wife and kids with their families are safe. The public support is unbelievable. Never saw that coming. I guess I didn't want to see it. I'm content, and I've told no one. Well, one person. We met face to face in the past, but I did get the info to him. It took 70 years to find someone. He can go 100 years into the future, and he says that's not his limit. He's okay. A kid, but he is the only one in all of the time that I've done this who keeps the secret. He does not need to do anything special. He just needs to think. He found me when I traveled back some years ago. I showed him all of the research, at least 10 years together we have spent. He's like a son to me. He knew the cost. Tells me I am honored and Stellar Flight will be named the KBC program. Yeah, I'm happy. In 200 years, he says, this will become a natural thing. Brian, Craig, and Keith, the forefathers. Yeah, who would have thought? So once again, ladies and gentlemen, that was just a short story called Craig, Brian, and Keith. And it came from, again, a dream where individuals were playing basketball and the individual was going down the court and he spun to one side. And as I thought about it, there we go. There comes the story. Here comes the sun. So what I did is I packed up all of my stories, the ones that were important to me, and I sent them back to the States. I didn't know where they were because there was so much paper, but I found it. So I just wanted you all to hear this story because it's one of those stories that I like. I know a lot of people are not into sci-fi, science fiction, but you got to admit, imagination, when it is used correctly, can be a very wonderful thing. And what nobody realizes is that we're the only creatures that are allowed to use our imaginations. You don't believe me? Go ahead and search. If you believe in the Bible, go ahead and search in the Bible and see if any other creature has the ability of having an imagination. Okay? It's only us. So why don't we practice it? Why don't we practice being creative? We don't have to be perfect. This story wasn't perfect. But you know what? Every time I read it, I like it. Because see, I know a Craig. I know a Brian. They're twins. They're brothers. They are, for lack of a better word, they are my brother-in-laws. So I know those two. And Keith, that's character is me. So it had some reality in it after all. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this was a very, 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 very short one. 22 minutes. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time. And as always, thank you once again for listening to the story, Craig, Brian, and Keith, the publisher.